Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, both present here and also joining us online, welcome to the International Seminar on Trade and Development Report 2023, or TDR 2023, a vision ASEAN's inclusive growth, hosted by the International Institute for Trade and Development, or ITD, in collaboration with the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, or UNCTAD, the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, or UNESCAP, and the ASEAN Studies Center, Chulalongkorn University. My name is Warin Sachade, very honored to be your MC for this significant event. Over the past 5 years, we have witnessed increasing globalization of trade, the rise of e-commerce, and the introduction of new technologies like digital trade and etc. But however, we still face numerous challenges, such as the emerging issues, soaring debt, and the impact of the climate change on our economies. Therefore, it is really important that we have this kind of international seminar to bring together experts from different fields to share the knowledge and insights, and also to collaborate on the ways to promote sustainable and inclusive economic growth. I'm very honored to be part of this gathering, and I look forward to hearing productive discussions and fruitful outcomes. But first and foremost, allow me to give you an introduction to ITD with this video presentation. Let's take a look.
Amidst the economic changes and the rise of digital technology and innovations in the world today, countries are more connected than ever before. The world that used to be big has become smaller as innovations created by human beings have created a society without borders, where knowledge transfer is no longer limited to an exclusive group of individuals, and access to information can be done in a matter of seconds. During the 10th session of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, or UNCTAD 10, one of the meeting's agreements was to set up an institution for trade and development in this region, where soon after, the Royal Thai government and UNCTAD came together and signed a cooperation agreement in establishing the International Institute for Trade and Development, or ITD, here in Thailand. ITD, a non-profit Thai public organization under the Ministry of Commerce, was inaugurated on May 1st at Chulalongkorn University in Bangkok. The Institute is a direct product of UNCTAD 10, which called for a series of similar institutes worldwide to train developing countries in commercial diplomacy, globalization, and international trade and investment facilitation. The goal of ITD is to become a leading organization that manages platforms and provides consultations to Asian countries to promote and strengthen international trade and development within the region, and bring economic growth and prosperity to underdeveloped and developing countries in Asia. ITD has 4 key missions. 1. To enhance the capacity building of developing countries in the region and sub-region by imposing an economic policy and regulation law. 2. To organize training and research in the field of international trade and development in order to develop human resources in the region and sub-region. 3. To support the cooperation on regional economic integration through exchanging of experiences and knowledge. 4. To work together with UNCTAD and related organizations to become the training and activity center to enhance regional trade and development capacity. ITD has been working closely with leading domestic and international government institutes and private corporations to organize activities, workshops, conferences, and seminars to educate and publicize essential trade and development issues to the public. ITD is responsible for the research and publication of various useful open-source studies regarding trade and development in this region. For over 20 years, ITD has been committed to overcoming all the challenges, and now we are ready to move forward while continuing to provide the private sector, NGOs, academia, and parliamentarians with reliable, up-to-date academic knowledge that broadens horizons.
Now that's the introduction of ITD, and now I would like to take this opportunity to kick off the international seminar by inviting Dr. Richard Kozul Wright, Director of the Division on Globalization and Development Strategies United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, to give us the welcome remarks. And he'll be joining us online.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to join you all for this very important discussion on fostering inclusive growth in the ASEAN.
My apology, that's the next remark. We're going back to Dr. Richard. Apology for that, Dr. Richard. Over to you.
No problem. These are the glitches of the digital era. Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon from wintry Beijing, which is where I am currently located. Thanks to the ITD for helping to organize that, to Dr. Sirikan and her colleagues there, to the ASEAN Study Center and to ESCAP for participating. The ITD, as the video clearly showed, has a very special relationship with UNCTAD because it is a product of our 10th conference that was held in Bangkok in 2000. So it's a great pleasure to make some opening remarks to you all. My colleagues, Nicholas and Rashmi, are going to focus on the particular trade elements of the report, the 2023 Trade and Development Report. I just want to add some more general remarks about the issues we cover and the state of the global economy at the moment that will frame some of the things that Nicholas and Rashmi have to say. I think we need to recognize the global economy right now is not in a very healthy situation. Growth has stalled this year, down on our estimation to around 2.4% from 3% last year. And there's clearly divergences across regions. But almost all regions, when you look at the picture, have also slowed. East Asia is an exception because China and Japan picked up growth this year, but Southeast Asia has certainly slowed down from over 5% last year to under 4% this year, and that's a fairly common feature of the global economy. Of course, when you're trying to understand, I mean, obviously there are many complexities in such a large context. We focus in particular just to get an understanding of why the economy is in a somewhat worrisome state by looking at the major players in the global economy, and in particular US, China, and the European Union. And one of the things we've emphasized is that there's a real lack of coordination across the big players, and they're not moving in tandem, and their policy agendas are moving in somewhat different directions. I don't want to go into the details of that. The US, when we look at the US, although growth is relatively slow, even by US historical standards, the US economy has probably outperformed many of the expectations at the beginning of this year. It will grow, and certainly it's going to outgrow our expectations. We thought it would grow around 2%. It's going to grow more than that. And that's because it's had a more balanced macroeconomic position, I think, this year than many people expected, despite the high interest rates that the Fed has used to address its inflationary problems. It has been more pragmatic in the use of monetary policy in the face of certain financial pressures, and it's used fiscal policy more creatively than other parts of the world. So the US is performing slightly better. We worry about next year. We see trouble ahead for the US economy. Next year, we'll have to see how that plays out, but there are tensions there that we need to worry about. China has also grown, picked up growth this year. Probably not as much as it should have, to be quite honest. It will probably grow around 5%, which is the target of the Chinese government. But in many respects, it should have been growing more quickly than that, given that last year was a slow growth, was underperforming and was relatively slow by Chinese standards. But growth has certainly picked up, and exports have picked up in China. There are still imbalances in the economy that a lot of people focus on. we're not as pessimistic about prospects in China as some people, but there are issues that Chinese policymakers will have to deal with over the coming year if they're going to sustain the 5% target that they've set themselves. The real worry in the global economy is Europe. Europe is close to recession. Some of its larger economies are already in recession, and it's not got the right policy mix to really drive growth over the coming year. So we are particularly worried about Europe. All in all, of course, a slow growing global economy means trade has also slowed down significantly this year, and that's we certainly see slow growth in the trading system. That's not a new feature. The global trade has been growing relatively slowly since the global financial crisis, and that puts pressures on many countries and particularly developing countries. And my colleagues are going to talk more about that, and I'm not going to talk about it in my opening remarks. What I wanted just to focus on really is a point that I think a lot of people have not really fully grasped, which I think has profound consequences for many developing countries and indeed for global policy challenges. And that's the weakness of the investment climate across the global economy and in its constituent parts. Investment is weak, has been weak for some time now, with one or two exceptions. China is an obvious exception to that story. But many developing countries have found it very difficult post-global financial crisis to raise the level of investment to the kind of levels that we think are necessary to meet their multiple development crises. And on top of that, of course, the climate crisis, which brings its own investment challenges as well. And I think we need to think much harder about why we're in a weak investment regime, because we shouldn't be. I mean, there's lots of finance in this world. Economies have opened up, regulations have been reduced. It's meant to be a climate that is beneficial for investment, but it's not been a climate beneficial for investment. And that has consequences for productivity growth, and productivity growth has consequences for international trade. So there's some real concerns that we have there. And without going into the complexity of the issue, the one thing that we focused on in this report, and as we have in previous reports in UNCTAD, is to warn about the dangers of an overly heavy financialized economy. The financial sector has grown, and the impact of finance and unregulated finance has increased significantly. That's not and the dangers of that, I don't think, are something we need to preach to people in Thailand. They went through an experience, of course, at the end of the 1990s that exposed some of the dangers of unregulated financial flows in terms of volatility, in terms of concentrated activity, and in terms of boom and bust cycles. And we haven't really dealt with that problem at the national or the multilateral level properly ever since the Asian financial crisis, and certainly not since the global financial crisis, when we expected to see changes. And one of the things we focus on in this report, and I think the concern to developing countries in general, including Thailand, is of course the rise of levels of indebtedness that we've seen over the last 2 decades, which is acting on a real drag, in our opinion, on investment and growth across the world economy. And focusing in on that problem of high levels of debt, I think, is a necessary feature if we're going to find a pathway to a more sustainable, more inclusive kind of growth path over the coming years. And that's what the international community has been promising with the Sustainable Development Goals, with the Paris Agreement, but we're really not there. And I think dealing with the problem of debt, and I came to China from Dubai, where we've just finished the COP process, and many developing countries are saying that they simply can't make the investments in climate mitigation and adaptation if we don't deal properly with their burden of debt. And the international community is failing in that respect. And I think that's an area of real concern in UNCTAD. The numbers are quite startling for some countries. And this year was we dodged a bullet this year because payments on both principal and servicing of debts were actually quite low. From next year onwards, debt servicing is going to increase quite dramatically, and we worry considerably that many developing countries are going to be tipped over, even if interest rates come down slightly in the United States and Europe, which is the prediction that there will be a decline in interest rates. But even if interest rates decline slightly, that will not be enough to help many of the developing countries that are suffering under a debt burden. And the consequences of that, the systemic consequences of that, have not really been properly analyzed by, for example, the international institutions in Washington. And so that's an area that is one that we are insisting needs to be fully addressed by the international community. It does have consequences for the trading system. I don't think you can have a healthy trading system if you don't have a healthy financial system, and we don't have a healthy financial system right now. So there are some real challenges ahead, I think, for international policymakers, for domestic policymakers in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, and finding the right kind of responses to these crises, I think, is something that we all need to do collectively. I think ITD is doing an important job in examining some of these challenges, and UNCTAD, I hope, is making a contribution in that regard as well. And my colleagues will pick up themes with particular reference to the trade system, which has its own challenges ahead in their remarks coming up. So thank you very much for this opportunity to present the report to the wider Southeast Asian community, and looking forward to the conversation we have. Thank you again.
Thank you, Dr. Richard. Dr. Richard Kozul-Wright, Director of the Division on Globalization and Development Strategies, United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, who has highlighted the importance of addressing the global policy challenges, especially the healthy financial systems, which is a very good remark to lay the foundation for our up-and-coming discussions. But next, I'd like to take all of you to our next remark, which is going to be by Dr. Rupa Chanda, Director of the Trade, Investment and Innovation Division at ESCAP. Unfortunately, she is not joining us online or on-site, but she has already recorded the message, which we already heard a few lines ahead of us. So let's take a listen again to Dr. Rupa Chanda's video message.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to join you all for this very important discussion on fostering inclusive growth in the ASEAN region. I want to thank the International Institute for Trade and Development for its steadfast commitment to promoting dialogue on this subject, and to all of you present for participating in this seminar and your interest in discussing how trade can promote more inclusive and sustainable development in ASEAN countries. We gather here today at a time of extraordinary challenges and uncertainties, which threaten to reverse hard-won gains in meeting the SDGs. Overlapping challenges in the form of stressed public finances and stagflation, disruptions to supply chains due to the COVID-19 pandemic and geopolitical conflicts, the looming climate crisis with its many ramifications, and the growing technological divide have brought us to an inflection point when we must pause to reflect on the path ahead. More than ever before, we need to grapple with not only how to accelerate growth and rebound from an economic low point, but also how to make this growth inclusive, sustainable, and resilient. In this context, trade has a critical role to play. In the past, trade has been an engine of growth. It has helped create jobs, raise incomes and productivity, and bring in new technologies and investments. In the ASEAN region in particular, trade has been critical for raising standards of living and for enabling integration into regional and global value chains and production networks. Trade has been central to regional integration efforts in the ASEAN region, the most recent example being RCEP. Hence, there's no doubt that trade is key to navigating some of the challenges confronting us today, both globally and in this part of the world, and in ensuring that going forward, the gains from growth and development are equitably distributed across and within economies. But this is not an easy task. Trade policy itself is grappling with many uncertainties and complexities. There is uncertainty about how the realignment of supply chains and the forging of new geopolitical alliances will affect trade and investment flows. There's uncertainty about how measures such as the EU's CBAM or the EU's deforestation initiative will impact supply chains and competitiveness in the developing world. Growing trade and industrial policy activism in leading countries in recent years pose a threat to free and fair trade. There are also concerns about how rapid technological advancements will affect export-oriented jobs in traditional industries, how they might aggravate inequities due to skill bias, as well as lead to more regulatory fragmentation and governance challenges. Coupled with these complexities is the weak outlook for trade in the near term, with its contribution to global growth likely to remain tepid. For the ASEAN countries, these concerns are very pertinent as their growth prospects and development strategies remain highly dependent on trade and investment performance and their continued integration with world markets. The need of the hour is thus to critically assess the current economic conditions both in the region and globally, and to see how trade and growth can play a mutually reinforcing and supporting role in the path to inclusive and sustainable development. This means assessing how national and regional trade policies and strategies can be used to address these challenges, such as through harmonizing regulations and standards, through deepening trade agreements, by developing institutional capacity and mechanisms to negotiate more effectively in multilateral and other forums on issues of common concern, and through developing resilience and sustainability frameworks. It also means understanding the interplay of trade and development strategies in the wake of changing conditions and aligning them effectively to not only face the complexities of today, but to also leverage the opportunities and mitigate the challenges of tomorrow. With these thoughts, let me conclude by once again extending my sincere gratitude to ITD and all present here today. I'm sure we'll have very fruitful and engaging discussions as we explore the possibilities for building an inclusive and sustainable future in the Asia-Pacific region.
Thank you, and that's the remark from Dr. Rupa Chanda, Director of Trade, Investment and Innovation Division at ESCAP. Our next two remarks will be on site. First and foremost, I'd like to invite to the podium Professor Emeritus Dr. Suthipan Jirathiwat, who is the advisor of ASEAN Studies Center at the Faculty of Economics, Chulalongkorn University. Please give him a big round of applause.
Sawasdee krab. Also let me join the other colleagues to welcome you all to this afternoon seminar. I think this is a very good opportunity, and in fact this is a long tradition for us to have such a collaboration with UNCTAD. In fact, talking this afternoon with Ambassador Crit, we go back to 2000 when we host UNCTAD 10 in Bangkok, and then by 1 year, 2 years later, we been able to establish ITD as it's become well prospered today. So as part of the joint organizers, I'm more than pleased again to see you all here, and I would like to say that this year TDR, I call TDR Trade and Development Report 2023. It has a lot of things to digest, and we will have a session that will be followed by panel discussion on the topic a vision for ASEAN inclusive growth. In fact, talking about growth, and to other colleagues just mentioned, and we all know 2023 is not that prosper as it should be. In fact, it is even still seeing the decelerate growth from the projection. The beginning of the year, we're talking about better post-COVID recovery, but it was not such a thing, and it's still lingering on because of the combining factor. If we think about the perhaps two colleagues not mentioned much about the geopolitical complexity, particularly from wars, that war in Ukraine And close to home, you could see also the war in Myanmar, that's between the military regime and civil, different ethnic groups, as well as the latest war in Hamas-Israel. All these complicated very much the macro outlook, the oil price, interest rate high, and all that caused quite a slow growth that we will continue to see well into 2024. Whatever the forecast you will heard here today, we hear from colleagues from UNCTAD and others are IMF and the World Bank. So for more developing nations, they all still struggle with low growth, and particularly ASEAN, because of the ASEAN, we are still a little below the median of 5%. Still not that bad, but the impact varies from country to country. But for sure, the impact is still real for an open economy like ASEAN. Our effect by lower exports, lower manufacturing production as a result of value chain disruption during the COVID, and still very much overflown into the way we organize the production across frontier. Fragmentation is another word that coming very often, de-risking policy from geopolitical rift between the major powers. So all this make it not that easy for us, even to that if you're looking about the kind of people flow, travelers. Thailand, we're talking here about the number of tourists still not catching up quite with 2019. So this is quite a kind of perhaps a kind of picture also not far from the global picture we looking for a kind of post-COVID recovery, and that's why I think this today's seminar is in fact it's a real exercise once more that we could look through the trade and development report. One example, and I took from also from this report, and also we talking more in our region, is about the kind of debt, the indebtedness of nations, all kind of debts. We're talking here in Thailand and Malaysia, we're talking about the household debt, which been very much increased, and private sector is still weak and they don't have much money, and then the high interest rate that caused them to make it more difficult for investment. And public debt this is also the focal point because of the rising debt from the COVID years. It has weakened the public sector capability to financing infrastructure needs or future needs for all kind of things, education, or health, technology, and all kind of things that we need to, if not manage well, if we're not managing well, it could weaken very much the way we will move into the future. For the interest of seminar, and I just talked to Sunanta, where we try to make make sense the distinction how we should look at our future growth, and it had to be serious taking from the word inclusive, whatever the resilient or sustainable to our growth, and this mean if we use this word, it means to be very much multidimensional, well thought out in priorities, action, and coordination. Take it example to ASEAN again. The region has been trying all this year in its integration efforts up to the building of ASEAN community building, and we try to address the need of finance, access to finance for MSME, micro, small and medium enterprise. This is a kind of pan-ASEAN project and pan-ASEAN policy that we looking as well very much about the human resource development, education, training, workforces in response to the need of future world. How sustainable, healthy our growth and economy could be if we are not properly address the inclusive wealth, finance, education, health. This is some of the few examples I could mention. And even more challenges we would need to look increasingly in tech, digital, AI transformation. There is going to be a total part of the whole landscape of our future growth. And that's going to make it, how to make it inclusive, how to make it resilient for our economy. That's still, the jury is still out there, and that the present picture is still far from what we could do. And if we add the slow motion of our climate challenges and action in our agenda is still not that inclusive in our daily practices, in our lifestyle, that would make our ASEAN look even more like a laggard. So that's why I think is if we take the latest, that we just talked about the COP28 in Dubai, that kind of joint action, collaboration to make ASEAN stand for is so important. And in this regard, I think this, and also perhaps to conclude that, to make you all remember ASEAN Summit in Jakarta, Indonesia this year, which has also emphasized the way ASEAN need to move forward for our ASEAN community building beyond 2025. Indonesia tried to put another day, 2045. And as all we know, we will not be able to go that far without our vision, our commitments, and also our action, working together for inclusive, resilient, and sustainable growth. That we need all collaboration, like beyond our region as well. So with this note, I wish you all a good success and enjoy this afternoon seminar, as well as the exchange we will have with speakers, panelists, to make it even more fruitful to everyone. Thank you very much. ขอบคุณครับ
ขอบคุณครับ Thank you, Professor Emeritus Dr. Suthipan Jirathiwat. And last but not least, our final remark will be delivered by Kun Sunantha Kangwan Gulakit. She is the Chief Inspector General from the Ministry of Commerce of the Royal Thai Government. Please give her a big round of applause to welcome.
Her Excellency Dr. Nalini Tawisin, Thailand Trade Representative, Dr. Richard Kosu Wright, Director of Division on Globalization and Development Strategy, UNCTAD, Dr. Rupa Chanda, Director, Trade, Investment and Innovation Division, ISCAP, Professor Emeritus, Dr. Suthipan Jirathiwat, who is my professor, my real professor. I used to be his student. He is the advisor to the ASEAN Study Center, Faculty of Economics, Chulalongkorn University. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the International Seminar on Trade and Development Report 2023, a vision for ASEAN's inclusive growth. Today marks a pivotal moment as we gather together to discuss critical themes shaping the trajectory of our economies and societies within the ASEAN region and beyond. The dynamic of trade development and long-term growth are at the heart of our discussions. Our focus on policy reforms for development oriented trade is critical in the world where interconnectedness is both an opportunity and a challenge. The relationship between trade policies and achieving sustainable development goals requires our attention and collective action. When we look back at the ASEAN Economic Community AEC Blueprint 2025, it outlines a strategic vision for member nations to establish a united market and production base, fostering the free flow of goods, services, investments, and skilled labor. Competitiveness, innovation, and inclusivity are prioritized. However, we have encountered a number of new issues as we progress. Climate change and the escalation of unilateral trade measures have revealed complexity that required immediate attention. As we face the urgent issue of climate change, we recognize the need to develop resilient trade policies that not only mitigate environmental degradation, but also increase economic progress. Uncertainty surrounding geopolitical dynamics further impacts South-South development initiative within ASEAN. The region is influenced by complex geopolitical interests, including tensions between major global actors. Geopolitical tensions can also affect the allocation of resources and priorities within the region, diverting attention from addressing inequality. Divergent perspective among member states or external geopolitical influences can impede ongoing efforts aimed at reducing inequality. Despite these challenges, ASEAN continues to strive for multilateral cooperation and sustainable development. Our objectives are clear and the stakes are high. We aim to dissect the existing trade and development policies in ASEAN nations, meticulously examining their impact on inclusive growth. The principles of inclusive growth is at the forefront of our deliberation, which highlights how important it is that the benefits of economic progress reach all societal levels. The relationship between trade and development policies in fostering inclusive growth and sustainable development in the ASEAN region is a narrative that needs our attention and concerted efforts. By addressing these challenges head-on and capitalizing on the opportunities before us, we contribute to a vision of sustainable and equitable development that will leave a lasting impact on the ASEAN region. Together, let us forge a path forward that promotes inclusive growth, empowers communities, and lays the groundwork for a more sustainable and equitable future for all in the ASEAN region and the global community. In order not to take too much of your time, I would like to end my remarks by expressing my gratitude to the experts, policymakers, and all the participants who have joined us today. Your knowledge and insights will help us navigate the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. I also wish to thank our sponsors and collaborators, namely the UNCTAD, UNCTAD, and the ASEAN Studies Center, Chulalongkorn University, for making this international seminar possible. On that note, I would like to declare the International Seminar on Trade and Development Report 2023, a vision for ASEAN's inclusive growth, is now officially opened, and wish you all a very fruitful and successful event. Thank you very much. ขอบคุณค่ะ
ขอบพระคุณมากครับ Thank you very much คุณสุนันทา กังวานกุลกิจ May I request for you to kindly remain at the front ขอเรียนเชิญด้านหน้าอีกครั้งนะครับ And you'll also be joined by Professor Emeritus Dr. Sotipan Jirathiwat, Dr. Dam Sukunthasap, Associate Professor Dr. Sinina Tsermcheep, His Excellency Mr. Sven Kalabut, Kun Supakit Jaran Kun, Dr. Nalini, and His Excellency Mr. Kiet Sithiamon for a group picture. There'll be two group pictures. One will be for the VIPs, and then the other one will be with the audience. So please wait for a few seconds. And the next one will be, we kindly request all of the VIPs to step to the middle of the room. And for the selfie shot with the audience, kindly have your back to the audience. We'll take a selfie shot. And may I request all the audience to stand up for a group picture with all our VIPs ขอเชิญทุกท่านยืนขึ้นเลยนะครับจะได้ถ่ายภาพหมู่ร่วมกันนะครับ I'd like to request maybe you can step closer a bit as well if you can. Thank you so much. I meant the audience. All right.กำลังจะเตือนเรื่องปิดมือถือพอดี ขอบพระคุณมากครับ Okay, I'd like to make a few announcements. I'd like to request our audience to kindly switch off your mobile phone for our next two sessions. One will be online and the other one will be on site. And I also encourage all the participants in this very room and also online to engage with the Q&A. If you're watching online, you can leave the questions at the chat box and our team will accumulate them and pass it on to me for the next two sessions and also to the moderator, so they will respond to the questions. And if you're in this very room, you can also raise your hand when they open for the Q&A, when they open the floor, and introduce yourself and shoot the question to our speakers and the panelists. So next will be the overview of the Trade and Development Report 2023 delivered by two distinguished speakers. First is Dr. Rashmi Banga. She's the Chief of Development Research Branch in Andesa, at Andesa, New York. She'll be joining us online. And also next is Dr. Nicholas Maestre, Senior Economist, Macroeconomic and Development Policies Branch of the Division on the Globalization and Development Strategies of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, also joining us online. So if you're ready, I will pass the floor to both of them who are already ready online. So Dr. Rashmi and Dr. Nicholas, take it away.
Thank you very much. Let me join others to thank ITD, UNSCAP, and ASEAN Studies Center for giving us this opportunity to present our Trade and Development Report. In this session, we will be focusing mainly on the trade chapter of the report. Like Richard mentioned, that the global economy is facing a lot of challenges, and particularly developing countries are facing multiple challenges. Trade somehow is not providing the necessary glue that is needed at this moment. And if we look at the the way things are progressing, there are many policies and measures which are being put in place by advanced countries, which are which are adding to the growing multiple challenges facing the developing countries. We have policies like CBAM, which can impact the exports of developing countries. And there are many unresolved issues that are weakening multilateralism, especially at the WTO. So the report is really talking about these issues, and in this context, it is proposing a bold and pro-development and cooperative approach that is now needed to be taken by the developing countries. It proposes that countries should revisit their existing trade agreements. There is a need to carve out more policy space. There is a need to strengthen the implementation of special and differential treatment at the WTO. And there is a need to come forward and have a common voice and solidarity so that the multilateralism is strengthened and developing countries can together face the common challenges, especially the challenges of the climate crisis, the rising debts, the global slowdown, as well as other challenges like the food insecurity and, as we all know, the shortening of global value chains and the weakening trade competitiveness because of the rising digital divide. So what UNCTAD feels is that these challenges also provide an opportunity for strengthening regional integration and South-South cooperation, which now becomes necessary for the developing world. So these are some of the key messages that come out from the trade chapter of the Trade and Development Report of 2023. Let me go a little deeper into these messages. The next slide, please. So if we look at the figures, the prediction that the report does for 2023 and 2024, what we find is that most regions are, going to face a slowdown. They are going to record a lower growth rate in 2024 as compared to 2023. And particularly US and EU, those are the advanced countries with big markets, which are the focus of exports for many developing countries. We also find that except for the Southeast Asia, which is a good news, most of the regions in the world are going to record a slower growth in 2024. So the global world economic output is expected to decelerate to 2.4% in 2023 before registering a small uptick to 2.5% in 2024, which is not going to be sufficient to revive the economies of developing countries. And development in international trade are further adding to the growing challenges of developing countries, particularly, next slide, please. If we look at what is happening in the recent, what are the recent developments in international trade, the challenges come out very stark. I will request my colleague, Dr. Nicholas, to quickly take us through the recent trends in international trade and also the distributional impact that these trends in international trade are causing. So over to you, Nicola, please.
Thank you very much, Rashmi. I hope you can all hear me. And maybe just to complement what Rashmi said about the Trade and Development Report. So yeah, we launched it in October, and for the first part, and the second part should come out by the end of this year. And I will also address, there will be a dedicated chapter on debt and the international financial architecture. So yeah, if you look online, I mean, just come back in a few weeks to have the whole report for the TDR. Okay, coming back to I mean the specificity and the reviewing some of the recent cyclical development in international trade. I would like to start with reviewing some of the recent trends, and there we will see that there are actually a mix of good and bad news. So on the positive front, several cyclical indicators suggest a return to some kind of normalcy after the collapse and the recovery that follow the COVID-19 outbreak, and which was particularly, impacting international trade, and given, the major supply chain disruption that took place between 2020 and 2022. But somehow, all that, has somehow come to an end, and you can see that from actually this slide, which basically synthesize through an index the supply chain pressure that took place recently, with a very strong, volatility between 2020 and 2022, and now it has basically moved back, close to this long-term, let's say, average. And so obviously, linked to that, some of the key factors, there are basically three main factors that can explain, this somehow return to some form of normalcy, at least if we consider the cyclical indicator. The first one is the end of the lockdown in China, coupled with the stabilization of transport logistics for goods in several developed economies. And that basically has eased, obviously, the transfer of goods around the globe. The second one is also the adjustment that have been somehow implemented after the initial disruption from the war in Ukraine, and subsequently the economic sanction that also affected, world international trade. And finally, we also have had a kind of normalization of the trade composition after the COVID-19 boom in demand for manufactured goods that has basically now receded. So yeah, in this context, it is not really surprising to observe a sharp decline in the supply chain pressure. Another type of, another supporting factor for trade has also been somehow the normalization of international maritime freight rate for containers, but also dry bulk. And as you can see from this slide, during the second half of 2022, there has been a sharp drop of these two figures after they surged to a historical high in the aftermath of the COVID-19 outbreak. And as you can see, and I've updated actually the figure since we released our TDR in the first part of the TDR in October. So there has been now a small spike in recent months for dry bulk freight cost, which have increased again. But this increase is expected to be short-lived. And actually, if you look at the consensus, there is the feeling that the rate might already have peaked, and that we should basically they should decrease again in the near future. And we can come back to that in the Q&A if there are some question about that aspect in particular. Now, also to say a few words about another component of trade, which is obviously, trade in services, and more specifically, some indicator that relates to transport and tourism. We can also see that the recovery has been relatively strong in 2022. If we look at one indicator, which is basically what is called the global air revenue passenger kilometers, it's a measure that basically track the number of kilometers traveled by paying passenger. You can see that in May 2023, and that's the black line in this slide, for the total industry, this metric was only 9% below the pre-COVID pandemic level. And since then, it has continued to increase. Unfortunately, I didn't have, I mean, the time to update the slide, but yeah, it's so that's also a good news. Now, sorry, and that's obviously, I mean, relevant for international transport and tourism. Obviously, I mean, when we talk about trade in services, there are other areas that also matter. I mean, and there the recent development have been rather heterogeneous, but what we can say is that in general, trade in services has shown a stronger dynamism than merchandise trade in 2023. Now, and it's actually something that you can see from this slide, which basically report the quarterly world trade data for merchandise and services. And actually, what you can see here is that, I mean, and although if you look at the data in value, we can see that, I mean, trade in dollar, in current dollar, has basically peaked to an all-time high of 32 trillion in 2022. So that was a 13% increase compared to 2021. And it was also a rise of 20% from the pre-COVID-19 level of 2019. Now, obviously, I mean, a key factor behind this strong growth relates to the sharp price increase that was experienced in some commodities, particularly energy, and to a lesser extent, agri-food and metals and mineral. And if we look again, and we try to purge this effect by looking at the evolution of merchandise trade in constant price, which is the dotted line in blue, you can see that actually the development of international trade has been much more subdued in recent years. We had basically a 3.5% growth in 2022, but for 2023, trade in goods and services is expected to only grow by 1%, with basically merchandise trade in negative territory. Yeah, we can see also that from this chart that from basically the middle of 2022, there has been a significant deceleration, in particular for merchandise trade. Though, I mean, services has been somehow slightly more robust. On top of that, of this somehow weak growth, we know that there are obviously, I mean, some downside risk that remain and that could further impact negatively the outlook. We have obviously, I mean, the ongoing trade tension between major economy. We also have, I mean, the weakening of global demand, the growing geopolitical uncertainty, and also, and Rashmi will come back to that later on, all the unilateral measure of developed countries that are impacting, I mean, developing country prospects. So to say a few words about Asian trade, unfortunately, I don't have the data for the ASEAN itself, but I'm sure, I mean, the panelists during the roundtable will devote more time on that issue. What we have observed is that, I mean, the trade in developing Asia has remained, I mean, rather dynamic, at least compared to other developing region. That's basically the red line for emerging Asia, but China and also China's trade in blue. Though, as you can see, I mean, recently it has also decelerated or being quite volatile if we look at Chinese export. So that's also an area of concern for the region. Now, to sum up what I say so far, we can say that, yeah, after the roller coaster ride of 2020-2022, global trade in goods and services is forecast to grow only by 1% this year. The normalization of the cyclical trade indicator after COVID basically should not mask also the ongoing tectonic shifts that are taking place in international trade, and we will come back to that with Rashmi. And also one thing that I would like to stress is that there has been a continuing asymmetry of the gain from international trade, and that's apparent in both advanced and developing countries, and that's a major concern for people who would like to see more inclusive growth around the world. And also, it has also created in many places some backlash against basically the rules of global governments and the very idea of free trade. Finally, as I said before, there are unilateral shifts in industrial policy in developed countries that are generating tension among trading partners, and that are also hampering the prospect for structural transformation in developing countries. Now, if you allow me to say a few words and to devote some time to the question of the redistribution impact of trade, I would like to present here, two brief analyses that we have conducted, which basically span the COVID-19 era. And so, as you know, increased trade flows have not always been accompanied by considerable progress in terms of development outcome. There has been, and this has been a long-standing concern of UNCTAD since its creation in 1964. Obviously, the trading system has undergone significant changes over the last 6 decades. But I think it's fair to say that insufficient attention to the question of redistribution of the gain from trade in developing countries and also in developed countries is a key area of concern. And one area of particular concern for us, sorry, someone trying to call me. Was the spread of global value chain controlled by lead firm, which were, often primarily headquartered in advanced economy, and sometimes they capture, the bulk of the gain in some country, and I will come back to that in a second. Now, obviously, in Asia, and in particular in East and Southeast Asia, there has been, some successful stories, but replicating those success has proved difficult elsewhere. So altogether, with the increase of trade, we have also seen, over the years, a rise of export market concentration with large firms which have increased basically their ability to extract rent. And assessing basically this distributional concern, both within and across country, usually come with a delay due to the difficulty in data availability and measurement. So basically here, to help address these difficulties, we have basically built upon, two analyses that we started in the TDR 2018. And more concretely, in the following slide, I will basically provide an update of our previous finding, which basically look at the concentration of export among firms within developing country. And secondly, the evolution of the labor and capital income share by basically looking specifically at the effect of the largest 2,000 firms in the world. Okay, so let me move back to that quickly. So the first main finding here is that export concentration appears to have strengthened in the majority of the observed developing countries in the sample between the pre-pandemic period and the COVID-19 years. And that basically raised concern about the market control and the distribution of the gain from trade. So unfortunately, in this sample, we don't have that many ASEAN countries. There is Thailand in the data. the people who basically build that database at World Bank are expanding it, so maybe there will be more a broader coverage in the future. But what we can say is that in general, there has been a tendency for export concentration to strengthen over these last years. And knowing that basically export concentration is already, highly concentrated among the largest exporting firm, which is already a subset of all the firms that exist within a country. So yeah, I don't have the time to really go too much into that, but that just to share with you some of the finding, and I invite you to look at the report to see more specifically the result. Now, finally,
thank you, Nicolas. Yes.
Yeah. Finally, what I would like to share with you is something more on the factor income distribution. And that's basically what you can see in this last slide that I have, which basically, plot in blue, the evolution of the labor income share at the global level between 2000 and 2022, and also the evolution of the income, the capital income that either accrue to the top 2000 multinational, that's the orange part, or to the rest of all the other firm in the world, or the capital owner, which is basically the green part in the chart. And as you can see, basically, from that investigation that use, financial statement from large M&Es together with other types of data, it's mostly basically a small subset of large firm in the world which have basically gained from, not only trade, obviously, but globalization in general, and mirroring this increase or this gain for the capital owner. There has been a decrease of the labor income share, which is basically the blue line on the right and on the right hand chart. And that's obviously, a major concern because it basically showed that growth is far and international trade is far from being inclusive. So thank you again for your time, and sorry for being a little bit long. And now I turn to Rashmi for the rest of the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nicolas. Thank you very much.
Thank
you. We haven't finished, please. So this trends in international trade really brings the question whether we do have a new paradigm of international trade now or not. Next slide, please. And what we really, next slide, please. So what we really see, what is coming out in the new international trade order is that there is a rising tension, rising trade disputes between China and US, which is shaping the international trade in different manner. There are growing international conflicts. There is rise of export controls. Whether these rise in export controls is because countries want to secure domestic supply, or they want to constrain geopolitical risks, or they want to encourage investment in locally based processing facilities. So whatever the reason, we do see there is a rising export controls, and there is a growing use of subsidies and other trade instruments by developed countries to foster green transition. But these growing use of subsidies and trade instruments are actually hindering the exports of developing countries. If you look at US, there is more emphasis on the new industrial policies, which include the Inflation Reduction Act, the creating helpful incentives of to produce semiconductors, which is called CHIPS, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and all these policies are mainly to promote green industrialization, like promote electrical vehicles, green manufacturing, etc. But this is also looking inwards. EU has their own policies under the banner of open strategic autonomy. They have the Green Deal Industrial Plan and Net Zero Industry Act. And under the Green Deal Industrial Plan, They have, the next slide please, they have measures like CBAM, cross-border adjustment mechanism and deforestation regulation. And what we really understand from exporting countries is that the EUDR, because of the traceability requirements, could constitute a de facto import ban. And CBAM, which is now being challenged by China at the WTO, this infringes upon the WTO's MFN principle. It unfairly penalizes the exports of developing countries because economies do not have the capacities to adapt to new specific standards. It is also by imposing CBAM, what is happening is that these countries are also violating the Paris Agreement on common but differentiated responsibilities, because exports of all countries, including all developing countries and developed countries, are treated at the same in the same manner. In next slide, please. In several of UNCTAD reports, we have looked at the distributional impact of CBAM, and what we find is that CBAM will reduce global carbon emissions by not more than 0.1%. So it is not going to be very effective in terms of controlling the total amount of carbon emissions, but the distributional impact of CBAM is going to be huge. It will decrease global real income by $3.4 billion per annum. In this $3.4 billion, the real income of developed countries rise by $2.5 billion, while the real income of developing countries fall by $5.9 billion. So if you look at one of the UNCTAD publication, you will find how different countries, country level data, how different countries would be impacted by CBAM, while the developed countries are going to be the major gainers like US and EU. So in this context, UNCTAD proposes that it becomes very important now for developing countries, especially ASEAN countries, as well as African countries, to take up a bold and pro-development and cooperation approach to address the fault lines in the international trading systems, both the old and the new. There is a need to revisit trade agreements at the bilateral, regional, and multilateral levels so as to create policy space which countries now need to revive their economies, especially in the face of global slowdown, rising debts, and climate crisis, and also the growing digital divide, as well as the growing use of robots and AI, which can adversely impact those countries who do not have the digital capabilities. There are 10 specific multilateral trade agreements which have been identified by the Group 90 at the WTO. And these agreements need to be revisited so that policy space can be carved out of these agreements, specifically agreement on subsidies and countervailing measures, and agreement on trade-related investment measures, which is TRIMS, and TRIPS, which is trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights. Now, it can be argued that ASEAN, TRIMS, and TRIPS have flexibilities for developing countries, but these flexibilities are not sufficient given the rising global challenges. What we need is policy space. There is a need to make special and differential treatment more effective and have solidarity and South-South solidarity and consensus. So this could also really mean that countries need to look at consensus decision making at the WTO, how important it is and how it needs to be retained for strengthening multilateralism. We also see that there is a shortening of global supply chains. Now, this could be because of the growing emphasis on industrial sovereignty. Countries need to diversify their exports now, export markets. And in this context, I would conclude by saying that South-South trade, gives a very good opportunity to developing countries to diversify their exports and increase their international trade shares. South-South trade has been growing in the past, and it is now 54% of total South's total trade. And it is interesting to see the areas in which South-South trade is growing is mainly food, fuel, ores and metals, and fertilizers. These are also the areas which are where the countries need to increase their shares for just energy transition. And there are some growth poles in the developing world like Brazil, China, India, Indonesia, and Thailand, which are playing major roles. So in the end, I would like to conclude, next slide please.
Dr. Rashmi, we are running out of time. My apology.
Yes, yes. So the next slide is thank you very much for your patient listening, and we look forward to the question answers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rashmi and Dr. Nicola. I don't think we have time for a Q&A because the system online will be cut off at 5 p.m. So we need to quickly proceed to our next session, which is going to be the roundtable discussion on the challenges and opportunities for inclusive growth in the context of trade and development policies in ASEAN nations. The panelists for this session, starting from Dr. Nalini Thavisin, who is the Harvard University graduate from Edward S. Mason Fellow and a PhD in Communication from Regent University, Virginia, and also Master of Public Administration, Harvard University, and she's currently the advisor to the Prime Minister and the Thailand Trade Representative. Dr. Dam Sukhonthasak is a co-founder and the director of the Institute of Diplomacy and International Studies, Rangsit University, Thailand. He's also director of International Institute for Trade and Development, or ITD, Ministry of Commerce of Thailand, and also an advisor to the Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs of the Senate of Thailand. Dr. Jan Duval is Chief Trade Facilitation Unit, Trade and Investment Division, United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, or ESCAP. And since joining ESCAP in 2002, he has designed and delivered capacity building programs and advisory services on trade policy and facilitation throughout the ESCAP region. Associate Professor Dr. Sininath Sermcheep is the director of ASEAN Studies Center and a lecturer at the Faculty of Economics, Chulalongkorn University. She's also a chairperson of the Center for Labor Development and Management, and she received her PhD in economics from University of Utah and is currently an assistant professor in economics. And last but not least, this session will be moderated by Sven Calibert, who's a seasoned advisor specializing in trade, digital trade, and e-commerce for governments in Asia and the Pacific. And with a career spanning over 13 years as a trade advisor for UNCTAD, he later went freelance, providing guidance to government ministries in Bhutan, Cambodia, Laos PDR, Myanmar, Thailand, Tonga, and Vanuatu. He holds Masters in International Economics from Sorbonne University and a diploma in Mastering Trade Policy from Harvard University's John F. Kennedy School of Government. Currently residing in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, where he was recently appointed as government advisor by royal decree, and Sven has significantly contributed to digital trade-related projects, collaborating with organizations such as UNCTAD, GIZ, Australian DFAT, and USAID. So I'll pass the floor to Sven. Take it away, and a big round of applause to all our panelists for this roundtable discussion on challenges and opportunities for inclusive growth in the context of trade and development policies in ASEAN nations. Sven.
Thank you, Mr. Sakdev. Sorry, I can't see you, but I say thank you with my heart. So welcome to the high-level panel discussion on challenges and opportunities for inclusive growth in the context of trade and development policies in ASEAN nations, organized by the Thai ITD. Allow me, first of all, to thank ITD for the invitation extended to me to be moderator for this panel. Few of you know that actually I was with UNCTAD before, and I was here at the birth of ITD in 2000, as well as the actual launch of ITD in 2002. So I'm very happy to see ITD as a 21-year-old lady or gentleman, I don't know, very healthy, going strong, so congratulations. And I would like to also extend my gratitude to our esteemed contributors and panelists for today. We have been deprived of the few minutes of our panel, so we'll have to be short, smart, and sharp. So this gathering of distinguished experts offers a unique platform to unpack the TDR critical findings, particularly in the context of the ASEAN region. So our panel today will delve into the nuanced interplay of trade policies, regional dynamics and global trades as outlined in the TDR. By exploring these themes through the issues of our esteemed panelists, we aim to shed light on the challenges and opportunities for inclusive growth within ASEAN. So to make the most of our time, of the few time we have for our panel, we will organize this discussion in 2 rounds of questions. First round of question will be more about the geopolitical context of the TDR. And in the second round of questions, I hope we have time, we will focus on some of the specific issues highlighted in the trade development reports. So I have 2 questions actually for each of you, including for Mr. Yan. Thank you for joining us. And I hope you had a safe trip back from Geneva, where we were in a panel together last week. So thank you, Jan, for joining us today. So without further ado, I'd like to move to the first one of questions. And well, I think it's safe and better to start locally with the local context. So I would like to turn to Dr. Nalini Tavisin. Doctor, you've heard this gloomy picture that was painted by the speakers. I'm interested to know how Thailand can cope, how Thailand can isolate itself from these gloomy trends that we've heard, and what has been the Thai trade policy in that context, first in ASEAN, but also outside ASEAN. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to all distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I think it was really an eye-opener listening to the reports and the information that people shared just now. And I think on the part of Thailand, we see, we were open to trade and investment, of course, and we would like to, expand further into the world stage. In spite of all the geopolitical crisis or whatever is there, I think there are things that we can do. And I think, in effect, we need to enhance trade and investment so that, for regional prosperity, for ASEAN to grow together. And I think ASEAN being one of the largest economy as a region in the world, I think we need to work together to expand together, and the opportunities there. And I think to compare, we are not really involved in the geopolitics of, especially Thailand. Thailand's not involved, and we maintain our balance and our, we focus on what we want to do for the prosperity of Thailand and the region. I think that would sum up the government stance at this time.
Thank you very much, Doctor. I think it echoes what we've just heard from UNCTAD on the importance of solidarity and prosperity. So I'll come back to these 2 words in the second part of the panel. Thank you, and I'd like to turn to Dr. Demp. You've heard from Dr. Nalini that Thailand is trying to not intervene or have a strong stand on geopolitics, but that we want it or not, there is, as you know, a renewed US interest in the region that is now called Indo-Pacific, and as part of Indo-Pacific, that includes as well Thailand. How do you see this new trend? How do you see the impact of US reinvestment in the region affecting in a positive sense Thailand, but also ASEAN?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. As far as trade is concerned, I believe Thailand and the region, we welcome all partners. And be it the US, be it our friends in Europe or elsewhere in Asia, I believe they're all important partners. And when we talk about partnership, it's all about shared interests. The title of this seminar is about inclusiveness, inclusivity. And because of that, I believe in Asia, where we are still pretty much a developing region of the world. Inclusivity and working with others would be the key for development. I've been reading about from the analyst, and including the presentation that we all have heard a while ago. It is quite, we all feel the challenge that we will all be facing next year. All the forecasts has been saying that if there is growth, it will be moderate. If there is a decline, it will be quite noticeable. Throughout all the regions of the world, except for Asia and Europe, there will be some growth. That's what most analysts are saying. And Asia and the Pacific will continue to be the driver of growth as far as international trade is concerned. So because of that, I believe that working with all partners will be crucial. And you mentioned very specific about the US. We are, as some of us may know, Thailand is in the middle of a negotiation on what is called the IPEF, which are 14 partners. I'll let the other speakers elaborate on that point because I was not directly involved. Anyway, this is another interesting forum or another interesting trading group that we should pay attention to, although it's been quite quiet in recent months, but there has been notable progress made. And as far as long as there are discussions, as long as there are exchanges of views, as long as there's enough talk and discussion about the government policies governing trade, I think that is always useful. Dialogue is always useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dam. And I am going to move to the north of Asia. And I'd like to ask you, Professor Sininat, whether what have been expressed by the speakers on the ongoing trade dispute between US and China and what you've heard from Dr. Damp is actually also seen as part of the trade with China, whether trade with China because of the reduction of the growth in China would have an impact on Thailand and on the region.
Thank you very much for the question. I think we all see the situation about decoupling between US and China is here. And in terms of trade, we see that with the imposed in terms of tariff and the amount of trade that those two countries put onto the list. Decoupling is one factor that for ASEAN we have to consider. Think about China and US, they are both the major trading partner and also investor for ASEAN. We cannot choose either one of them. But according to that, what ASEAN should be, what ASEAN should do in a way, decoupling in this time here affect in terms of trade, but part of it directly in terms of trade between US and China, some part going down, but indirectly, ASEAN gets some benefit anyway. US import more from ASEAN, and major part of that one, double in terms of input. ASEAN country import more from China. So look like those two still connected indirectly in a way. Another aspect is in terms of investment. Because of the issue of the decoupling here, China come to invest in ASEAN. So by that case, what ASEAN should do in this kind of situation, we have to think further in terms of the situation between those two countries, but the trade still there. We need to rely on some part in terms of import input. ASEAN need to keep going. But according to that, we need to think more about how ASEAN together, we should enhance each other. Besides thinking outside of the group, but we have to look back into the group as well. Maybe this is a time that good for ASEAN as well in a way that we just entering the past post-COVID period. And also ASEAN is thinking about ASEAN Community 2045. So it's good time to taking stock about what's happening here. Resilience is something that we need to take into account, and the decoupling and also the COVID-19 pandemic accelerate that issue, that situation, and make ASEAN need to think carefully. How should we walk in the future? How should we decide in terms of the regional cooperation? And I think that can be something that ASEAN can think more. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor. I like this cautious optimism that you are all displaying given the adverse trends that we've heard. Indeed, there is optimism in ASEAN. Together we are stronger. We are coming towards the end of the AEC Blueprint 2025, so there is a need and a possibility to revisit what we have achieved. And I'd like to turn now to the multilateral representative in the room or in the virtual room, which is Dr. Yan. Doctor, you've heard, I guess, like us, about this kind of pessimism and gloomy trends that UNCTAD has painted and in the presentation of the TDR. You've also heard about this hope to revisit some of the multilateral agreements that Dr. Rashmi has mentioned. So please give us some hope, Doctor. Is the multilateralism the solution? We always go back to multilateralism when we have trouble elsewhere. And I'd like also to pick your brain on one of the highlights of the report, which is the report expressed concern over the new initiative of advanced countries which will adversely impact global trade, namely the carbon border adjustment mechanism and the deforestation deregulations. What can you tell us about this, and do you share this pessimism that we've heard all this afternoon? Over to you, Dr. Yan.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation. Sorry I can't be there with you in person. Let me be very, very brief, right? So first, I think it's good to be optimistic, right? We should try to be optimistic, although definitely the data is not so great. In fact, I can tell you that in ESCAP, we're going to release our Asia-Pacific Trade and Investment Trends report within the coming 10 days. And I was actually comparing the forecast of UNCTAD and what we have for the Asia-Pacific region. And actually, our numbers are even more gloomy than what UNCTAD has in its report, with a big distinction between trade in goods and trade in services. Actually, trade in services is growing quite a lot in 2023 in Asia-Pacific. Trade in goods actually goes to negative territory, right, and significant negative territory, and so that's going to be a challenge for 2024. But I think we can, those statistics are there, but then, we should take a positive attitude to this. There's a lot of opportunities that are there if the policies, the right policies are implemented, right? There is a lot of opportunities in terms of digital trade that can be tapped. I think ASEAN countries are in relatively good shape, many of them, to tap into those kind of opportunities. So what I would like to say in terms of the multilateralism issue, possibly is that the multilateral trading system is the first best principle, the best in principle. It is something that every country, everyone, especially the smaller countries, developing countries, should be focusing on, should be trying to protect. Unfortunately, it's not doing so well now, right? So I think having a very pragmatic approach, combining still being active on the multilateral front, but also combining this with regional approaches, sub-regional approaches like ASEAN is doing, is something that is very relevant. And one message I would give, generally speaking, is that it's important to focus not only on like coming up with new agreements all the time, right, but actually implementing the existing agreements. I think there is a lot of scope for better implementing existing agreements. There is a lot of provisions on cooperation in those agreements that are not implemented properly. So I will be focusing on this, obviously using international tools and standards where available. I could go into the climate, but I think I'm going to go way over time, right? So let me stop not talking about climate if you want.
Thank you, Doctor. I'll come back in the second round of question with more even more specific questions, but thank you for your take on what we've just heard today. And I'm going to move into the second round of questions to our panelists, and I'll go into more specific details. So Dr. Demp, you've mentioned the IPEF, and I'm turning again to you, Dr. Nalini. For those of you who are not familiar with IPEF, IPEF stands for the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity, and this is a kind of new trade agreements with 14 countries, including Thailand, where we don't negotiate market access in the past, but we basically negotiate investment from the US against rules and standards. Thailand is a very active member of IPEF, obviously, and I'd like to turn to you again, Dr. Nalini, to understand what is expected out of IPEF, out of this new kind of trade agreements in exchange for investment from the US. Are you ready to use and apply the rules and standards that are suggested by the negotiating partner? Over to you.
Thank you. I think, with all trade agreements or any such multilateral agreements, that they're going to be give and takes. And I think as we work together, as we negotiate together, ultimately we should find common ground to move forward with. And when we find that, I think we can move forward with strength in the partnership. And I think, before I go on to the IPEF, as with the WTO, when there were issues of that from the, before rules and regulations and everything. And I think we have an expert here, the Chief Inspector General. She was at the WTO and she's very well versed in that. So the IPEF framework, basically, I think it encourages countries in the region to collaborate together. And the significance of Thailand's active involvement in the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, IPEF, provides an essential and constructive role in ensuring that Thailand seizes the opportunity. We look at the opportunity, the mutual opportunities and benefits that we can get together, and we can become an integral part of this initiative for economic cooperation in this emerging, for the region. And I think it's also, while we work together, that's this thing that the 5 Chamber of Commerce got together and they came out with 5 to Thrive, which is basically ease of doing business, which is, which addresses the investments and everything that IPEF addresses. And I think that's also what Thailand is also working towards, that we want investment. Therefore, we have to also, see what we can do to make it easy for people to come. And this addresses everything from the business visa to the company acts and all that. So I think, I think we can do it, and I think it'll be beneficial for both sides, with the negotiations and everything that comes forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. I'd like to expand on what you've just mentioned, maybe zooming out for ASEAN and what it means, what IPEF means for the regional security. Do you see, Dr. Dem, as an opportunity, as a threat? What's your take on this?
Well, I'll try to keep my comments on trade issues.
Yeah.
But I don't see IPEF as a threat, or I don't see that it would be threatening to any of our trading partners. And as I mentioned before, dialogue is always good, and we should promote more of that. And I don't think if we're involved in IPEF, it means that we favor one partner to another. It's not in that sense at all. While we're on this topic, what I would like to mention briefly about is your question to Dr. Young a while ago. Without being specific, I believe you were referring to CBAM. the impact on the environment and on society by trade is important. It is something that all nations should attach importance to. However, what we also would need to look at would be the cost adjustment of trade. Because regulations such as CBAM, yes, it is important. Yes, it is also vital in creating the awareness of all countries and also commitment to a better world. But at the same time, what we need to look at is that the impact that it would bring, especially on the cost of trade and also the access of people in developing countries to trade. When I say this, we're talking about the supply chain as well, because trade would lead to production, it would lead to the transfer of knowledge and technology, it would lead to people being involved, for instance, in agriculture. It would be the very grassroots people. All of these people that I mentioned, they will be impacted by regulations that would force them basically to increase the cost of production, increase the cost of trade. So we have to look closely into that as well, because at the end of the day, it will be the consumers who would have to pay more to consume the goods that they consume. And so this is it a concern? I would not say that it is a concern in the sense that we're looking at CBAM as a protectionist policy, but more from the more practical standpoint that we need to have more discussions on the implementation of CBAM. Now it is already in force, but I think more discussion would be necessary.
Thank you, Doctor. And climate change is a very important aspect as well of IPEF. So I like the link that you made between the two. And I'd like to make another link maybe with Dr. Jan online. Doctor, IPEF Chapter 2 or IPEF Pillar 2 is on supply chain resilience, including logistics. I know that your division has a very clear focus on trade facilitation, trade policy, and cross-border facilitation, but also on supply chain resilience. I'd like to hear a bit more from you whether what you've heard, one of the few positive notes from the presentation of the TDR was on supply chain resilience and the fact that less stress on supply chain. Have you observed this, especially in developing economies? And what is the role of ESCAP in mitigating or in supporting developing nations in that context?
Thank you, Sven. So again, very briefly, I think yes, post-COVID, definitely. I mean, you had a trend of the supply chain going back to normal or pre-COVID to a large extent. I mean, before other things like geopolitical tensions and inflation, further hit and affected again a number of things. But generally speaking, I would agree with what's in the report. One thing is ASEAN actually has been doing quite well generally on trade facilitation, trade digitalization. They've taken this to heart in making improvements. And so this also is very well reflected in some of the data we collect, for example, through the UN Global Survey on digital and sustainable trade facilitation. The next step and stage in terms of boosting supply chain resilience in relation to paperless trade and trade digitalization is really achieving what we call cross-border paperless trade, which is the electronic exchange of data and documents across countries. So again, ASEAN, as among the 10 ASEAN countries, there's been some good work being done on this through the ASEAN Single Window Agreement. But there's a lot more things to be done. And in fact, UNCTAD is a secretariat, it's in Bangkok, right, for a UN treaty dedicated to cross-border trade facilitation. Thailand was one of the countries who led the beginning, the initiation of negotiation of that UN treaty, but has yet to actually accede or ratify it. So what I would like to suggest, in fact, is that Thailand now accede and ratify as soon as possible, because many other countries have come on board, and then now implementation is starting. So that would help Thailand and ASEAN keep the lead in this very important area of trade digitalization and cross-border paperless trade. We leave it at this. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. And as you know, we have a lot of high-level officials from Thailand in the room. So we hope that your message will be heeded and that Thailand would accede to the framework agreement very quickly. I'm going to close the loop and going back to you, Dr. Srinath, on what it means for Asia and for ASEAN countries to face these undercurrents that were highlighted in the report. And I'm going to quote the report. The TPR say, according to the report, after experiencing a roller coaster ride in 2020-22, global trade in goods and services is forecast to grow about 1% in 2023, significantly below world economic output growth. It is also lower than the average growth registered during the last decade, itself the slowest average growth period for global trade since the end of the Second World War. So that's very gloomy. What does it mean for beyond 2023, 2024, based on the studies that you're doing at the ASEAN Study Center? Is there room for optimism after this 2023, 2024, or are we going to go into a slow growth over the years that come?
Thank you very much for the question. I think in terms of the global trend right now, because of the mega trend that's happening, beside the trade war that happened, also the war that in those regions, in terms of climate change, also affect agricultural product as well. So this trend may last quite some time. That's what I think. And by this one here, anyway, we're recovering from COVID, but with many factors that happening all together. So I think it's time for the country also in ASEAN, also in Asia region, that we need to look back into the connection between the country in the group and also the outsider, I mean external partner. Given that major country in terms of US, China, EU, and also Japan, economic kind of like slow down a little bit. So ASEAN can also, take ASEAN for example, ASEAN can also think back to our country, our friend inside the group as well. We all see that in terms of intra-ASEAN trade, it's kind of like stagnant for quite some time. So we get around like 22, 23%. So this can be additional engine of growth, I would say. We keep external partner, we still want to expand our growth anyway, but this is additional engine of growth. We can look back to see what we can do right now. The number is not that high, maybe because of our endowment that we kind of like selling pretty much the same kind of good, but in terms of expansion of service sector, especially on the digital economy, maybe we can group together and find some way to do more trade among the country. Beside the major country that we usually trade on, right now I think the global is kind of like more open. So we can see major partner from Latin America. I can see some friend from Mercosur. He is a trade representative over there. He bring the businessman to Thailand. So I also asked him, okay, what are the business that they cooperate? So we can see many opportunity out there. So kind of like I would like to say that we don't follow the previous model, but we can look broader and see more what are the opportunity that additional partner and also new way to cooperate together. And digital economy can be one factor to enhance that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I like that you end this second round on a positive note, which I hope that we will all heed in the near future. I'd like to turn to a moderator who I can't see to check whether we have questions in the room, or I understand that we also have a number of questions online. I have a gentleman in the front. Please let us know who your question is addressed to. Over to you, sir.
มีคำถามจากออนไลน์ไหมครับ Okay, please proceed.
My name is Krajiti. I was former Director General of the Department of Treaty and Legal Affairs and Department of International Economic Affairs, Foreign Ministry, and also former ambassador to Vietnam, India, Hungary, and Malaysia. Every time when ITD organized the forum, it's been my nostalgic time because I was heavily, substantially involved with UNCTAD and also the establishment of ITD. When we host UNCTAD 10 conference, at the time I was the Deputy Director General of the Department of Economic Affairs, was responsible for UNCTAD, and I was assigned to negotiate with UNCTAD for the establishment of ITD. So we have to mention the name Dr. Ruben Recupero, who was the Secretary of UNCTAD at the time, and also many names that have to come up when we speak about UNCTAD 10, which address the opportunity and challenges of globalization. You mentioned that you were there when we host the UNCTAD 10 conference. At the time, we just come up with the question of the stagnation of a multilateral round of trade negotiation. The Uruguay round had ended and supposed to be starting Seattle round, but certainly it's not because of this crisis of globalization. Of course, we have financial crisis in 1998, 97, and most of all, the multilateral system, trade, investment for development, which is the major work of UNCTAD. This is the address in our UNCTAD 10 conference. So at that time, Dr. Ruben Recupero just offered to the Thai government that since Thailand offered to host this UNCTAD 10 conference, so as a memorable and concrete gift for Thailand that he wants to see the Institute for International Trade and Development to be established. And at the time, I believe that all of those member countries of UNCTAD, when they have they have to go to Geneva for all those seminars and so on. So I think that if we start this International Trade Institute as a branch of UNCTAD for training and also for research, that will be the best way that we can serve the goal. So after the Bangkok conference, UNCTAD 10, of course, we have the agreement to set up the International Institute for Trade and Development signed during the meeting by Dr. Surin Pisuwan and also Dr. Ruben Recupero. So this is what I think we are today already 23 years since the international trade and development had been established. So we have to, of course, address the same issue of globalization. Of course, UNCTAD is not only provide policy advice, but most importantly also to build up capacity. Of course, we have a lot of the multilateral trade negotiation, international trade negotiation. Of course, UNCTAD, WTO, and ITC have to work together. And of course, they are all holistic manner because trade, finance, technology, health, and environment, these are all the important elements for the present day.
My apologies, sir. We have to interrupt. I need to make a few announcements for the online viewers. Could you please check our link and maybe fill the survey form, because the online system will be cut off at 5 p.m. And hopefully we can also finish the session in this room by 5 p.m. Thank you.
Just let's finish what I have been saying. Today is one of the most important day for ITD and also UNCTAD. We are to launch also the Trade and Development Report, and of course now we are to address the current globalization and the trade and development, which certainly involve all issues.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And thank you to the Thai government as well to sustain ITD beyond the creation.
Yes,
and after 20 years, we are still here to talk about globalization. Thank you, sir. I'd like to get a sign from one of the organizers on whether we have questions from the online audience to any of our speakers. No questions? Right. Mr. Moderator?
I don't think we don't have any questions online, so we open the floor to the people in the room.
Sir?
Yeah.
Please tell us who you are and who your question is addressed to.
Yeah, my name is Casper Suksan. I'm a founder of Seabridge and also the Executive Vice President for Thai Startup Association. So we work on a lot of partnering in terms of new generation startup and things like that. So I just flew back from Riyadh actually. So one of the things that we talk about trade policies and all the different strategy on the high level. One of the things that I've found recently, because we also do a media company, is actually this people-to-people interest. For example, a lot of the products, a lot of cultural stage, for example, everyone I talk to in Saudi Arabia, for example, have been to Thailand, or at least one of their family members, Vietnamese that we work with, been here 4 times a year. So I wonder if we have any of the strategic policy in terms of supporting some of these people-to-people collaborations when they were younger, so then in the future they can start collaborating more, since some of the panelists actually mentioned that in terms of increased intra-ASEAN trade, for example, creating new market beyond just the US and China, for example. Yeah, so is there any, or, yeah.
Well, I think you mentioned trade policy in Thailand, information, creative industry and companies. So I think if you agree with me, Dr. Nalini is better placed to respond if you allow me to ask.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. But I like your question, and I think this is an issue that needs to be raised some more. But however, like I had an opportunity to meet with the YEC, who are part of the Thai Chamber of Commerce, and the people there were really active. And I think I'll talk to them some more, and I think we'll formulate something that can be done in a more, like at a policy level, so that there'll be interaction, like within the country as well as, like intra-ASEAN and also on the international stage. I think the youth, the power there is really important, and I think I'll be happy to talk to you some more about that too, to get your ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. And I think Thailand is a good example of how you do trade promotion in a very effective, productive ways. I think the Thai Trade Office, the Trade Promotion Department, do a remarkable job at promoting Thailand overseas. And I know it's an example for many countries in the region to emulate what Thailand has done. So absolutely, yes. Do I have another question in the room, in our audience? No?
Can I follow up?
Please.
Yeah. No, I think Dr. Sininath would have something to say later on. But to add to what Dr. Nalini has just said, both of them in their presentations a while ago, they mentioned about digital trade, and this is an area which I believe the government would very much like to promote. And I think what Dr. Nalini said is precisely what we need is to go deeper into what would be the needs of the entrepreneurs, the young entrepreneurs like yourself, and what the government can do to support. What I like very much is what Dr. Sininath mentioned a while ago, that we need to be more creative. we need to find more ways, be innovative and find innovative ways to conduct trade. And this is because exactly what Dr. Yang mentioned a while ago, that right now, whether we like it or not, there is an increasing stress on the supply chain. And because of that, digital trade would come into play a big role in helping to alleviate the situation. And so I fully support Dr. Nalini that more discussions with the young entrepreneurs, with the new young people who are coming up in the area of international trade, we should have more dialogue with them.
Absolutely, and in the future, all trade will be digital trade. In one part or the other, you will have either the flow of information or the flow of goods will have a digital part. So absolutely true. Thank you, Dr. Dam. You were asked to comment, so please.
Okay, thank you very much. I would say that, okay, I'm from economic department, but I would say that connectivity, understanding with each other in terms of people to people, is the starting point of trade, it's the way we trade, and it is a factor of the key success for trade. So I would say we know each other in terms of new market, understanding, knowing about each other, is it online or in terms of physical, both way can work. So with this kind of situation right now, I think it's kind of like right opportunity we had to think about the whole package, would say. And I really encourage the way that youth exchange. We used to do that before, and actually the student that used to join ASEAN Study Center program, they're still connected, even for now, like 10 years ago. So this kind of relationship here is not only about student to student, but the people to people. Maybe in the future they can work together. They can be like one investor to come to invest in the region. So that can be something that we can looking forward to. And I'm glad Dr. Lini mentioned about that one can be like pushing forward for this situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'd like to close this by saying that beacons of knowledge like ITD, but also ESCAP and UNCTAD, have immense wealth of information available for whoever is interested, of course from the academics, of course from public officials, but also from the private sector. Because I think what is core, what is a challenge that I'm observing nowadays is not only information, but information on information. We know information is available, but we don't always know where to get the information from. So this forum offers a place to get information, and I hope that we trigger interest in the audience here in the room, but also online, to seek for more information. Unfortunately, we only have 45 minutes together. If I could, I would have maybe 3 hours with each of you to get more information. But this is to say that, first of all, I'd like to thank the three of you and Dr. Yan online to give your time and your expertise, share your insights on the TDR panel, to have a note of optimism as well, because it was not very optimistic what we've heard so far. So I'd like the room online maybe, but also especially here in the room, to join me to give a round of applause to our panelists. And a big thank to ITD for organizing this seminar, this conference. And with this, I give the floor back to moderator who I not see, but I'm sure he's there.
Thank you, Sven. Thank you so much. A big round of applause to Sven as well for moderating the session. And that's a wrap for the international seminar on TDR 2023. Before we leave, I would like to make a special request for you to fill the survey form. We have a hard copy in front of you at your desk, or you can also scan the QR code on the monitor. Kindly give us the feedback so we can improve our next and up-and-coming events. Thank you very much.